South Africa has some of the worst cases of gender-based violence against women and children in the world. Many women and girls are murdered at the hands of their partners.
So sad that South Africa is the rape capital of the world.
More than 13,000 were domestic violence related.
In South Africa, we do find that every 3 hours a woman is killed.
Almost 73,000 assault cases reported in the same period.
Feels like we're not safe anywhere. As long as you're a woman in South Africa, you have a target on you.
Like millions of men across this country, I am appalled at the war that is being waged on our sisters, our mothers, our wives, our partners, and our daughters.
On the 1st and 2nd of November 2018, South Africa's women said enough is enough. During that first South African presidential summit on gender-based violence and femicide in Pretoria, they made it clear that South Africans can no longer look the other way. We need to acknowledge that we have a big problem. Gender-based violence is an epidemic and a national crisis. And so amidst the COVID-19 pandemic, the mammoth task of creating a South Africa free from gender-based violence and femicide was undertaken. COVID-19 presented additional challenges, and the rate of gender-based violence in the country increased significantly during this period. The National Strategic Plan's vision is a South Africa free from gender-based violence directed at women, children, and LGBTQIA+ persons. To achieve this, 6 pillars were identified, with the Department of Social Development leading the 4th pillar of the National Strategic Plan. Pillar 4 addresses gender-based violence and femicide through a focused approach on response, care, support, and healing. In line with this year's presidential GBVF summit, the Department of Social Development, under the theme Accountability, Acceleration and Amplification Now, reports on the implementation of the previous 3 years. The Department of Social Development is the custodian of the Children's Act, which obligates us to care for and protect children. They are the most vulnerable to sexual violence and killings. Since the summit, there's been great achievement around ensuring children are cared for and protected. More than 13 million children receive the Child Support Grant, which is collected by their caregivers, in the majority women. Over the past 3 years, we have had programs specifically for children in order for them to be aware of their rights, for communities to protect and care for children, and for them to understand that the caring and protection of children is not just for government responsibility, but society as a whole.
Leadership, it forms part of our compendium of care, which is our behavioral change programs. Amongst it, we've got Men and Boys Championing Change, where we're hoping to actually have a different men by 2030, but also affirming the ones that are there to assist us to reduce the high prevalence of gender-based violence, of HIV, but also taking responsibility for their children. We also have the program called YOLO, where you are saying you only live once, behave responsibly and take responsibility for your behavior. Then we've got Chomi, which is our 10 to 14-year-olds, where we're trying to make sure that we catch our children. We teach them through play. They need to play whatever the indigenous games of that area, from hopscotch to khati, diketo, ligusha, snakes and ladders, you name it.
We are, as a department, currently working on the Children's Amendment Bill, which essentially is trying to strengthen areas around the care and protection of children. And I think this is one of the mechanisms that we will be utilizing as government, as the Department of Social Development, to ensure that we protect not only women but also children. And I think that that's an important aspect.
In the country, the face of poverty is black and female. The Department of Social Development recognizes the linkages between a lack of economic opportunities and gender-based violence. Women sometimes feel trapped in abusive relationships due to their dependency on their abusers. This is why giving cash to women to look after their children through the Child Support Grant and the 350 COVID-19 SRD grant remains one of the most important child protection tool measures. There are currently 300 shelters across the country which provides psychosocial services and skills development, emergency white doors and green doors, victim-friendly rooms located in numerous police stations across the country are also available to victims. The GBV Command Center was established in 2013 to respond to gender-based violence and femicide. It has won international awards as one of the best facilities worldwide.
The National Emergency Response Team, since its inception in 2016, and when it was launched by the Deputy Minister of Social Development, Honorable Edieta Bogopane Zulu, it have really strengthened a good relationship with the National Department of Social Development and also the provincial, district and the local Department of Social Development at all spheres of government.
As NART, we are also involved with the Department of Social Development, more specifically the Older Persons Program, where we work closely in bringing awareness to communities, especially rural communities, on the need of the older persons, especially older women, that the community members sometimes seen as witches and witchcraft and kill these vulnerable women.
So as it relates to legislation, we are currently working on the Older Persons Amendment Bill, which is currently before Parliament. And really what we seek to do is to try and strengthen our measures or mechanisms rather as it relates to the care and protection against abuse of our elderly.
Then we got our first funding in 2004 from the Department of Social Development. DSD is our main funder. It's really our biggest funder for all the services that we render. The shelter accommodates beneficiaries of gender-based violence, mother and her children. We also accommodate trafficking in persons. So we ensure that the beneficiary is assisted holistically, from physically, emotionally, financially, yes, through the skills development that we engage with them.
Of course, while we might decry the period with which the women live in those shelters, we would like those women to leave the shelters feeling much more empowered and feeling more safer.
We are a body or movement or structure started by men who are activists in the space of gender-based violence and femicide. And for us, it was a call to rally all the men in the country, from politicians to personalities, sportsmen, and we were affected by the scourge or the level how GBVF has affected our communities.
Yes, the National Development Agency, how it fits into the program of gender-based violence is that the NDA gives funds to NPOs who are responsible for running special programs that are focused on gender-based violence. The National Development Agency also receives funding from the Department of Justice through CARA funds, which is Crime Asset and Recovery. Monies that have been collected from criminals, and that money has to be used for the good of our communities.
So for us, as NDA, it was 95 million. And we then sat and had a discussion, and ultimately, we then felt that we would then rather give an amount which was 300,000 to those organizations that we felt at least they would be in a position to handle the funding correctly. And then we had 200,000 to the ones that we refer to as emerging. The purpose actually being that if you fund those that are emerging and you can build their capacity through mentorship and coaching, they would find it easier to access funding from any other businesses or any other organizations besides the National Development Agency.
What we also do is that we have what we call as dialogues in the department. Those dialogues form part of the communication about policy, about what people are and how people are receiving policy, and where we can be able to make changes. Most importantly is that we speak to people in the language that they understand and within their community experience and their own ways.
So we push that narrative. We try to change the mentality. We try to correct the societal ills that are affecting our communities. GBV has gotten to a point where it affects everyone. It affects families, it affects children, it affects relationships, it affects even the elderly.
Over the past 3 years, the Department of Social Development has embarked on many more initiatives which directly address the National Strategic Plan on Gender-Based Violence and Femicide. While 3 years may not be nearly enough time to realize the envisaged impact, continuous and incremental progress will see the DSD edge closer to the 10-year outcome. COVID-19 has also taught us the importance of moving from paper to digital platforms. Through the integrated justice system, the Department of Social Development is digitizing its work to monitor and evaluate services, for people to apply and pay NPOs on time, building databases for older persons who are victims of abuse, and improving the Child Protection Register. The Department of Social Development continues to collaborate and partner with other departments, the private sector, civil society organizations, and NPOs. Through a focused approach on accountability, acceleration, and amplification in the implementation of the National Strategic Plan, we will edge closer to realizing human dignity, healing, safety, freedom, and equality in our lifetime.